animal welfare. All I can say is that every time a big truck drives by with pigs inside of it, I do cry, and they look very sad.
Can you tell me what the Farm Bill is?
Nope. Farm Bill? Yeah, nope.
Animal welfare? Well, I assume that's when an animal family is below the poverty line and receives additional support from the government. So the Farm Bill is the man who has worked on the farm for 80 years.
Tell me, what do you know about Proposition 12 in California?
Oh, nothing. I know nothing about that. I'm so sorry. Animal welfare, like how they take care of the animals. You know, agricultural and food things.
I don't know what the Farm Bill is.
Hello everyone and welcome back to the Cat Podcast. I am your host Sydney Schnorr and I am so glad to be bringing you guys back for season 2. For this episode we are going to be talking to Quentin and Kaylee, and if you listened to the previous episode you would know that Quentin and I had a really nice chat in that episode about this episode. So we wanted to pair these together for you guys. I think they complement each other really well. And we have a really interesting conversation ahead of us about animal rights and animal welfare. So with all of that, we'll let them take it away.
Welcome to another episode of Advocated Unplugged. Today, we're diving into a topic that sparks passionate discussions across agriculture, ethics, and consumer choices: animal welfare versus animal rights. I'm Quentin Slater, joined by my co-host, Kaylee Young.
That's right, Quentin. These terms are often used interchangeably, but they come from very different philosophies, and today we are going to be uncovering what these two terms truly mean, not only to us agriculturalists, but our consumers as well. Understanding these differences is crucial, not just for those in agriculture, but for everyday consumers who interact with these issues in surprising ways. Joining us are 4 fantastic guests who will help us explore the topics from various angles. First, we'll hear from Ann Koltoff, an assistant teaching professor at Iowa State University, and she'll help us understand the practical applications of animal welfare in agriculture.
Then, we'll welcome Elizabeth Veneman, the County Youth Coordinator for Marshall County Extension and Outreach. We'll also be speaking with a representative who has an animal rights mindset in comparison to animal welfare.
Finally, we'll hear from Anna Carl, a consumer who doesn't have a strong stance but represents how many of us navigate choices influenced by animal welfare and rights. We've got a lot to cover today, so grab your coffee, tea, or whatever you're sipping on, and let's dive in. All right, Anne, thank you so much for joining us today. We're excited to have you on this episode and to hear your perspective on such a hot topic in the agricultural industry. Before we dive deep into animal welfare and animal rights topics, do you want to just start by sharing a bit about your background and your journey here to teaching at Iowa State University?
Sure, I would love to. I grew up on a diversified grain and livestock operation in Northeast Iowa. Grew up showing cattle, sheep, hogs, and that's kind of what got me started into the animal science field. When I graduated high school, decided I needed something a little bit different than Iowa State. All my classmates were coming here, so I'm kind of the black sheep a little bit, and I decided to go out of state for my undergrad. I went to South Dakota State in Brookings, got an animal science degree, worked at one of the livestock farms all through my undergrad. And while I was working there, I was able to be involved in some undergraduate research. And that's really kind of what sparked my interest in maybe a graduate level program and further education, and as well as the extension work. And so did my undergraduate there, was able to stay on and do kind of a concurrent program. So I worked full time and managed their sheep farm. And then simultaneously worked on a master's degree for fun, I guess, or something around. That's usually what I told people, is that I guess I'm doing this for fun because I have nothing else to do in my free time. And so through that, I had a unique perspective where I got to work with the undergrads from a teaching perspective. I still got to do some of the research with some of the graduate students as well as my own. And then I still got heavily involved in the extension and working with producers. And that's kind of where I thought I really wanted to go. And so when I completed that master's degree in that ruminant nutrition field, took an industry job working for a niche meat company. And so really focused kind of working with the producers on the producer education in terms of what those niche programs were. And so some of those were animal welfare claims. Some of those were, some niche feeding claims. Then also worked on the consumer side in terms of educating those consumers as to what this really means and why are we doing these practices. I did that for about 3 years, but really enjoyed more so working with the producers, specifically sheep producers, and so had the opportunity to come back and work for Minnesota West in what is more commonly known as the Pipestone Lamb and Wool program. So I worked with about 120 sheep producers in the upper Midwest area, doing a lot of producer education and extension type stuff. So still in the education field, but still doing more on-farm activities with them and helping them better their operations. Unfortunately, had to leave that job kind of due to some life events. I got engaged, and apparently you can't move farmland from state to state, or that's what my fiance told me at the time. And so brought me here to Iowa State, or brought me to Iowa, and then a former ISU animal science faculty and or mentor contacted me. We had been kind of in touch off and on, but suggested reaching out to Dr. Sturley, and I guess the rest is history. Here I am. So I've been at Iowa State for the last, I guess this is my third fall semester, teaching a variety of courses, and yeah, just loving it.
Yeah. So you talked a little bit about animal welfare in your first answer there. For the listeners that may not know, how would you define animal welfare, and how does that differ from animal rights?
Yeah, so I think everybody's going to have a little bit of a different definition. And so I guess when you go back to the principles of it, really it's kind of making sure that those animals that we're taking care of are living purposeful lives. And that they are well taken care of. We're minimizing their suffering. But that also, when I think about it and what I teach my students, is that it includes those 5 freedoms, okay? And those 5 freedoms of hunger and thirst. They always have food and water available. Freedom from discomfort, that they're in a comfortable living environment to what they seem comfortable. They're free from injury, pain, and or disease, so they're healthy, right? They're not suffering in terms of illness or injury, that they have that ability to express normal behavior. And so if it's cattle, that they can be out and graze, or pigs can root, or whatever that may be for that specific species. And then last, that they are free from fear and distress. And that's probably the more hot topic one in terms of what constitutes as fear and distress, I think, at times. But really that, we're not tormenting them, we're not terrorizing them, we're not, I guess, in the wild, it'd be having a predator come after them at times, right? And so we give them those best lives with trying to give them those 5 freedoms and let them express who they are individually. The other thing about welfare is welfare can very much be scientifically evaluated, right? And so it's objectively measured. We can take measurements and say, yep, you've met this threshold that you seem to be doing well, right? And you have a good environment to thrive in. Rights, on the other hand, is more of like this ethical argument in terms of why animals should or should not be used by humans. And it's really hard to evaluate, right, their rights scientifically. And so it's a hard, because it's whether we should or should not be using them, but yet do we have any data to back that up as to why we shouldn't be using them? So it's really more of just this moral, ethical discussion around there. And do they play into each other? Absolutely, but they are very much two different things.
Thank you. So I guess you talked a little bit about how really comes down to the principles and talking with your students about the 5 freedoms. How do you, I guess, go about incorporating those more in the classroom setting? And do you have any student interaction sometimes where they can confuse those 2 terms?
Yeah, so I teach, a variety of different classes. One of those is ANS 1900 or an Intro to Animals Handling, Safety, and Welfare. I always mix those last three words up. But it's really this course that's designed for our animal science students that don't have a livestock background. And so, I grew up with handling animals since I could probably walk. But most of these students that come into our animal science department, or half of our animal science department students, are more companion animal based, companion animal focused, may have never even touched a cow, touched a pig, any of that type of stuff. And so they didn't grow up with that background information that most students in agriculture would have, right? And so this course is designed to help educate them and give them that background information in terms of maybe those 5 freedoms or why we do certain husbandry practices that we do, right? And so when we talked about pigs, we talked about why we're ear notching them, why we're clipping eye teeth, why we're docking tails, those types of things, right? In the equine section, we talked about different gaits and why there are some welfare concerns in terms of training horses for different gaits and how they're done versus what, the proper stuff is. And so we talk a lot about that and where we have conflicting inputs, right? We have the scientific side of it, but we also have that doesn't seem right. That doesn't make sense. That's why we're doing that. Then I also teach a current issues class, which you've been a part of, and where we talk about some of these controversial topics, right? And certain things about, I keep thinking about we have the Animal Rescue League and come in and talk about trap, neuter, release. And is that an ethical? Is that a welfare concern, right? Or should we be doing something different with these companion animals? And it's even a companion animal, but we also talk about it, from a Prop 12. We had somebody come in and talk about Prop 12, and is this, while in theory this makes sense, right? But is it applicable to everyday life in terms of how can we implement some of these things? And so we talk about both sides of them on both things. Just A, it stimulates some really good discussion. And then, but B, also to maybe provide students that are not as familiar with some of these topics. Some of them are controversial, but give them kind of hopefully a well-rounded experience or background of what these are and how do we justify some of these things that are maybe being put into place.
Yeah, so you talked obviously a lot about that, how you apply that in the classroom. Going out of the classroom, what are some challenges that producers face when implementing animal welfare practices, and how do you see those evolving within the future? I mean, everything's always evolving.
Yeah, so a lot of these practices that we're starting to see or we're having to put in place, there's a cost value to it, right? And while we all love what we're doing and, we'd love to be able to say that, yeah, it doesn't matter if we make money or not, for a lot of people, we still have to be able to put food on our own tables, right? We still have to be able to pay the electric bill. And so we still have to make a profit, right, at these for most producers because they may not have a full-time job and this just be kind of their side hustle. That's not the case. And so as we continue to implement some of these, and I come back to, thinking about the Prop 12 housing standards, with that, some of those producers, they've had to decrease their sow herds by 30%, right? There's a cost associated with that because A, they have less pigs in the same amount of square footage, and if the consumer who put this kind of law into place isn't willing to pay for it, we're kind of in a pickle, right? And so those are the things that are going to continue to be hard, right? If the consumer isn't going to pay for that premium for that welfare claim, whether it is Prop 12 compliant or, zero gestation crates or free range or whatever that welfare claim may be, if we can't pay for it, it may not be economical for that producer. And so the part that really makes me a little bit nervous is, right now some of these are voluntary, some of them are not. And what we're starting to see within this kind of animal rights community is that they're starting to put legislation in place, or they're trying to put legislation in place to help kind of push their welfare agendas. And which is all fine and dandy until we end up not being able to raise animals or we're getting pigeonholing ourselves into where we can't do anything, and it's getting to be more cost effective than it is worth, right? And then, okay, so then we can't raise animals, so what do we do with the animals? We can't just turn them loose because they're not used to fending for themselves. And so I think some of those things are going to be harder and harder to implement, and it's really going to come down to that producer's bottom line. And is it sustainable, and is it able to be implemented, and is it worth it?
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Anne. We really appreciate your insightful answers, and it's really fascinating to see that practical application of animal welfare and that impact for the current agricultural industry and the future of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Now we're going to shift gears and talk a bit about how these ideas are shaping the next generation of agricultural leaders.
I'm excited to have Elizabeth Veneman with us, the County Youth Coordinator for Marshall County Extension and Outreach. Elizabeth plays a key role in coordinating programs for youth development, engaging young people in a variety of educational opportunities. She works closely with community members, leaders, and partners to create enriching programs to empower youth to grow and develop their skills. Elizabeth, thank you for joining us today.
Could you tell us a little bit about your role as the County Youth Coordinator for Marshall County Extension and Outreach, and then also what programs or initiatives are you currently focused on?
So, as the county youth coordinator, I wear quite a few hats, but the biggest part of my job is organizing safe and engaging educational programs for youth. So, that means I do a lot of work on the back end with like risk management, making sure our programs are following 4-H policies and all that good stuff, which includes the county fair. So, a lot of people think about the county fair as a fun place to show, but as staff, there's a lot of stuff we have to do on the background, and our main goal is to create a safe learning environment for those Marshall County kiddos. So, yeah, whether it's livestock or non-livestock, we're just really trying to make sure that there's just good, safe learning environment for the kiddos.
Perfect. So, going towards the more livestock route, I know from a personal experience, YQCA has been a huge part of youth livestock education. Can you just explain what this program is and how it helps to teach the youth about animal welfare?
Yeah, so YQCA was developed quite a few years ago. First, we had FSQA, which you guys might be familiar with if you were in 4-H. YQCA has been a pretty recent switch, and it stands for Youth for the Quality Care of Animals. It's evaluated and then delivered annually. So there's a new training that comes out each year based off of different initiatives that have been targeted for that specific year. There's a group of people who serve on that board, extension specialists, livestock industry leaders, so on and so forth, just making sure that those standards are being met. The main goal for that program is to ensure a safe food supply for consumers and to ensure that the well-being of animals is being maintained through youth producers. So they also touch on important issues like one year they did tell us your ag story. So learning how to communicate and educate in a safe manner for youth to be engaging in those conversations.
And then in your role, do you encounter misconceptions about animal welfare versus animal rights, whether that be among youth participants or their families? And if so, how do you address these?
Yeah, I would say that those who don't have very much exposure to the agriculture industry are thinking a lot more on those animal rights side, whereas people who have experience in animal agriculture are thinking more on that animal welfare side. So just like a little bit of difference between the two. Animal rights, they're kind of thinking more in a mindset that animals have similar rights to humans. And on animal welfare side of things, they're thinking in a mindset of how do we make sure that these animals have a quality life and while they're serving the purpose that they are intended for. So in my position, I serve the community as a whole. So that includes those who are on the animal rights mindset and those who are on the animal welfare side. We try our best to kind of mediate between these two different things. So that's where YQCA does come in. We're trying to really teach our kids best practices. And then So, like with YQCA, we'll cover like withdrawal times, everything like that. We also take a look at rule books where we're trying to balance that animal welfare, animal rights mindsets.
So, speaking of rule books, that kind of trickles into county fair season. So that's coming up right around the corner. Feels like forever away, but it's right there.
Yeah.
Um, so, kind of what are some of the key aspects of animal welfare that you focus on during that event?
Yeah, so this is really where we start to run into that animal welfare versus animal rights thought process. So this is where a lot of our practices are out in the public for everybody to see. And so everybody includes, like I said, I serve the community as a whole. So that includes those with many different mind frames. And so one example when I was thinking about this question is like a prong collar for a dog. There are people who argue on both sides, whether that is something unethical to use on an animal or whether that's something that's best for the safety of the exhibitor, the animal, and everything else. In our rule book, we don't allow prong collars. So that's where we're really trying to balance this out. We don't allow prong collars, but we have month-long training sessions with those kids to make sure that they are safe when they're coming into the county fair. So keeping in mind that animal rights side of things while also maintaining the health and safety of the kids and the exhibitor. Another one we're kind of looking at this year is the drenching process. So we know that that's used for hydration in animals, but it can look a little scary to those who don't understand what's going on. So we're in the process right now of looking into how do we balance that out to make sure that that animal is still safe and healthy, because during county fair, they're hot, they're stressed, they're in a new environment, they may not be drinking water. Animals can't go weeks without water. So how do we make sure that those animals are still being safe while keeping that animal rights mindset in mind as well?
Yep. So it sounds like these programs really do try to create that positive impact. What is your hope for the future of youth and animal welfare in Marshall County?
Honestly, my hope is that we can just kind of be proactive. You know, I'm not sure if you're familiar, but in 2019, Johnson County had some animals being released from their county fair. I think that started around like a rodeo dispute, which is obviously very different than showing livestock. But there's going to be people who are innately against showing livestock. And that's okay. They are completely able to have that opinion. However, you know, we also serve a community that heavily believes in the showing of livestock. So just trying to be proactive so that we are showcasing the positive, safe learning environment that we are really trying to provide to these kids.
Yeah. So thank you, Elizabeth, for sharing your experiences. It's incredible to hear how youth programs are shaping future generations to make informed decisions about animal welfare. Now let's hear from a different perspective, one that challenges the use of animals in all industries.
According to their website, People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, or PETA, was founded in 1980 and is dedicated to establishing and defending the rights of all animals. PETA operates under the simple principle that animals are not ours to experiment on, eat, wear, use for entertainment, or abuse in any other way. PETA informs policymakers and the public about animal abuse and promotes kind treatment of animals. PETA is an international nonprofit charitable organization based in Norfolk, Virginia, with entities worldwide. Quote, PETA believes that animals have rights and deserve to have their best interests taken into consideration, regardless of whether they are useful to humans. Like you, they are capable of suffering and have an interest in leading their own lives. End quote. Kaylee and I were lucky enough to be joined by two representatives, Talitha McMilligan and Starlin Costa. We were able to ask about their own personal work and any misconceptions that the organization may face from the general public.
All right, to start off, background from either one of you. We can do either just one of you or both of you answer this question. Just in general, how does PETA engage with industries like agriculture, fashion, or entertainment that heavily rely on that animal use?
Yeah, that's a great question. I can take this. So overall, PETA opposes speciesism, which is the misguided belief that some animals are more important than others. And speciesism also teaches humans that we just have a right to steal. So for example, for food, steal milk from cows that's intended for their babies, or abuse and kill animals for their flesh, take eggs from chickens, and so on. And so we'll work through public education, investigative news gathering and reporting, research, animal rescue, legislation, special events, celebrity involvement, even protest campaigns to help animals on factory farms and so on. And then overall, like on an individual level, we encourage people to go vegan, offer free education resources, including we'll send free guides to going vegan with like recipes and stuff to make it easy for people. For clothing, animals used for clothing, our goal is just to reduce the sum total of animal suffering. So we'll encourage people to buy faux fur rather than real fur, because it certainly helps. And then we also have a list of companies that offer, the stylish, cozy fake furs, and we have PETA approved vegan, just to hopefully make it super easy. It's all in one spot for people to look up. In recent years, we've also seen incredible advancements in alternatives for leather and fur, including there's been a massive adoption of bio-based mushroom leather and cactus leather, which is great, as well as developments in like vegan silk and lab-grown fur. And in 2023, Sabian, I think is how you say it, and Stella McCartney partnered to create the first 100% plant-based, plastic-free fur alternative. It's made from nettle, hemp, and flax, so it's even biodegradable. And in many ways, leather isn't even, because of the tanning process that it goes through. And so we have that. There's a lot of animal-friendly, eco-friendly alternatives to cashmere. There's seaweed wool, and also others made from hemp, bamboo, coconut. So we can provide links to all of that too, if you want to learn more. And then let's see, we cover animals used for entertainment too. That's another position that PETA takes, and that's that wild animals simply belong in the wild in their natural habitats. And when they can't be, such as like when they're injured, ill, or habituated towards humans, which is the case of most of the wildlife currently in captivity, they should receive the best care in facilities that are accredited by the Global Federation of Animal Sanctuaries or the Association of Zoos and Aquariums, because those require high standards of animal care and act as like an extra layer of oversight, which is very critical since proper animal welfare enforcement is very weak and inconsistent. So yeah, I mean, we've made significant strides in all these areas, and of course, there's more work to be done, and PETA will continue to fight for helping animals that are suffering in like roadside zoos, circuses, marine parks. Simply spreading the word is one of the most effective ways to keep the momentum going, and of course, reaching out to our local representatives to help that as well. We have letter writing guides on how to do that. So just sharing, but on an individual level, just sharing with people around you is what we encourage.
That's interesting. I guess I didn't realize there's so many new like alternatives, I guess, in the fashion industry. So that's cool to hear and listen in on. I guess transitioning. So a lot of people in the agricultural industry and food production sector have the claim that animal welfare standards that we put in place ensure ethical treatments of animals. So does PETA kind of see those improvements as enough, or is that kind of goal in the end to eliminate the use of animals altogether?
Our ultimate goal is not bigger cages, it's no cages. It's not less suffering, it's no suffering. So I think for this question, it's important for how we define animal welfare versus animal rights. Animal welfare, it sounds like it means well or it's a good thing, but we'll explain how we define animal welfare. Animal welfare theories accept animals have interests, but allow these interests to be traded away as long as it benefits humans in some way, and that somehow justifies it. But animal rights means that animals, like humans are animals, have interests that cannot be sacrificed or traded away just because it might benefit others. We believe in animal rights, but animal welfare is a harmful mindset to have because it assumes that it's okay to exploit animals if it benefits us. Animal rights protects every animal's right to be safe and free and enjoy things that make them happy. So I think that's, defining those two terms is important for this question. So we don't need to kill animals for food, and we can actually lead healthier lives by living vegan. You've probably, you walk into the grocery store and you see labels like cage free or free range. And unfortunately, those are nothing more than a marketing ploy, and they don't make the process more humane. Vegan diets can provide us with all the nutrients we need. So that's kind of why, we stress that we don't need to, it actually doesn't benefit us in any way to harm animals. But I guess some people think maybe it does, but I don't know. We have some more links for our guide to going vegan too in there, but I hope that answered that question for you.
Yeah, especially just because there's so many, like a lot of the welfare laws in place are very poorly enforced, and they leave out a lot of animals. We like to mention the Animal Welfare Act in relation to animal testing and how it leaves out rats, mice, and a ton of other animals that are commonly the victims of animal testing. So unfortunately, we haven't found them to be quite reliable in improving.
For sure. I think you both offered very good perspective on that point. Going off more on the background of PETA, what do you think are the most common misconceptions about PETA's stance on animal rights, especially in relation to that debate on animal welfare?
Yeah, this is a great question, especially because, a big misconception in general is just that we are bigger than we are. I think we are often perceived as like a big threat to like these industries that are profiting so much, like billion-dollar industries that we're up against, and so they have so many resources at their disposal to just give us a bad name whenever they can and kind of misconstrue the stuff that we're trying to put out in the world. So it's great when people come to us directly to ask our stance. Ultimately, I mean, our goal is just to get the animal rights message out to as many people as possible, just create a kinder world. And because animals are exploited in so many different ways, really every decision you make can make a difference. So yeah, unlike our opposition, which of course, as I mentioned, consists of these wealthy industries and corporations, we have to use like free advertising that we get through media coverage. So we'll do provocative things to get the word out about cruelty to animals, because we've learned from experience that sadly the media doesn't just cover terrible facts about animal suffering alone. So it has to be interesting enough to cover. Yeah, so we found that sometimes it's necessary to kind of like do these demonstrations where people have like body paint or just something that's eye-catching, just to stimulate the debate and kind of challenge the status quo and hopefully prompt some action. One of our big misconceptions is that PETA is against companion animals. We do not support the practice of breeding, and so we encourage people to adopt instead of buy from breeders, especially just because they're so routinely like inbreeding the animals to have certain traits, right? Like flat faces for pugs and bulldogs, or just really short legs for dog cushions that can cause serious health problems for them. And as long as there's animals without homes, there should hopefully not be more litters born. PETA staffers like happily share their homes with animal companions, and of course advocate for adoption because of the millions of unwanted animals that are in shelters every year being euthanized or just not able to be adopted. There are over 7 million homeless animals in the US alone. So of course, we're going to advocate that they be adopted first, and that we hopefully will implement more spaying and neutering laws, support appropriate local laws just to make this available at low or no cost to families, things like this. And of course, PETA has a shelter of last resort. We encourage people to try finding in their local communities first, but often people will come to us if they can't find a vet near them that will do the procedure at the cost that they can afford, or even just providing like, a peaceful release to life for older dogs who need it. And so people will often bring their animals to us, and we'll cover that often at no cost at all. So yeah, that's a big misconception about us, but we are simply here to help with that, and even just help people be able to keep their animals. Sometimes people don't want to give them up, they don't have the resources, so we'll try and provide that too. But yeah, overall our goal is just to create a society where animals in general are treated better.
Yeah, I'm definitely glad you brought that up. I mean, companion animal, I mean, obviously that's one thing that I was actually going to ask about, but I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah.
I think that's one thing that people really don't think about with PETA's stance on that.
Yeah.
I also really think it's interesting when you brought up the point about like the body paint and all that. I think it's a really interesting way to look at it. I'd never really thought of it about it that way.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting, and have have even like participated in some local. I haven't done the body paint, but like we'll sometimes have, inflatable or big cutouts of polar bears or something, just to kind of get people to look our way. And then once they're in, we'll talk to them more about what we're there for and stuff. But yeah, it's a fun thing, and I'm glad we could clear up the companion animals. We get a lot of comments that are like, "Oh, you don't want us to have pets?" And we're like, "No, that's not the case."
Yeah, I definitely agree with what Quentin said. It's very interesting because those were two things that I was kind of like, oh. So, I guess we kind of talked about this last question, I guess, throughout, but we talked about that some claim that improving animal welfare rather than advocating for animal rights is a more practical approach for how we live. I guess what is PETA's response to that perspective? We've touched about that a little bit, but
Do this. We have supported laws before, like animal welfare laws that are in the best interest of the animal, but there are some laws that do virtually nothing to protect animals, and so they're only created to mislead consumers, and we're not going to support those. We have a list of on our PETA 2 website of some of the laws that do exist, and we mentioned the Animal Welfare Act, the Endangered Species Act. So there are some laws, but we need better laws. And we have a guide to like writing animal friendly legislation as well. I should link to that as well. PETA and other animal advocacy groups continue to challenge regulations and call for stricter enforcement of the laws that do exist, because some of them are poorly enforced. And our best hope is documenting the cruelty and showing government officials and the public the atrocities that do occur. A picture is worth 1,000 words. And then, when people try to say that's not happening, well, we have the evidence right here that it is happening. The best way to create lasting long-term changes for animals is making sure future generations understand that animals have the right not to be turned into a burger or a belt or what have you. And that's kind of where PETA 2 comes in. PETA 2, we are a young person's guide to compassionate living. And we are relatively young. We started in the early 2000s. So that's why maybe not as many people have heard about PETA 2. They know what PETA is, but PETA 2 is this newer youth-friendly spin on PETA. And we exist to help students like you to help animals in their everyday lives. And or if like people are starting to go vegan and they want some help, we also have a rewards program. I think, Talitha, do you want to talk about that at the end? But I think that is we did repeat a bit about like our difference between animal rights and animal welfare. So that's just some additional information.
Yeah, and I love to like also just make the point of how Starlin has had to hear this story so many times now. How it really is like just so effective to talk to your local representatives. I volunteer with like a local animal rights group. We kind of are an unofficial like just group that shows up at and protests at circuses, or we used to. And then we finally like took our case to our city council. Like we'd go to public forums and speak and just be like, please pass the law to not allow wild animal acts in our city. And it took like 5 years, but there was also, COVID, so things shut down for a little bit. But like, anyways, eventually they did pass it, and it really just is so helpful to just show up at the meetings and be like, hey, could y'all care about this issue that I care about? And sometimes they will. So, and then, yeah, I think, as far as rewards, oh my gosh, PETA 2 rewards is so much fun. I love it. I wish I could be a part of it, but I get to see everybody's submissions, so that's great. Basically, we just publish missions every week that are just like, hey, sign this petition, you'll get 25 points or whatever. And it's December, so actually we're doing double points for everything. Or comment on this page asking them to use vegan leather instead in their clothes or whatever. So you'll get points for doing that. It's all free, and then once you get enough points, you can like cash them in for also free stuff like t-shirts and mugs or stickers or whatever you'd like. So it's really fun. I definitely recommend checking out our like rewards shop just because it's all very cute, and that's just the point of PETA 2 is to make everything kind of like more approachable and not so daunting for young people. So
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, thank you to both of you. I mean, you both offered a really that unique perspective about PETA and PETA 2 especially. I'm glad you brought that in. It's always really important to consider those different philosophies when we're talking about topics like that.
Anna, welcome to our podcast. So before joining us today, how familiar were you with the concepts of animal welfare and animal rights?
Yeah, before today, I hadn't really heard the term animal welfare ever used. It was mainly just referred to as animal rights, and I wasn't exactly sure what that entailed. But now I believe that I've been hearing animal rights more described as what animal welfare would actually be.
Yeah, so when you make decisions like buying food or buying clothing, do you consider how animals are treated? And how does that influence your choices, and what influences do those choices make?
As a consumer, I tend to more gravitate towards products that are cheaper rather than necessarily how they relate towards animal cruelty and that kind of rights. However, if they were to specify that they are cruelty-free, then I'm more likely to gravitate towards those products because I obviously don't want animals to be harmed. But I'm not against using their products, using eggs and meat, that type of thing, even for clothing. I'm not really like against any of that, but I am against testing and
all that stuff, experimentation and
yes,
that stuff.
Yes, experimentation especially.
Yeah, for sure. So I guess as a consumer, going off a little bit off of that, so there's a lot of talk about these premiums for better animal welfare protocols and more labeling. As a consumer, would you in the future, obviously right now we're at an age where price kind of influences our purchases through everything, but throughout down the line as a consumer, could you see yourself purchasing more of your products at the grocery store if they have those labels?
Yeah, I think especially being more educated towards how to find those labels and what exactly those labels entail, what it means exactly, I think definitely it could influence my purchases a lot later on.
Going off of the grocery store and kind of how we purchase things, we live in a digital age as well, and there's so many different media outlooks, different social media platforms, advertising campaigns about these issues of animal welfare and animal rights. When you see those, I guess, have they shaped your perception of what the livestock industry is?
Truthfully, yeah. In our day and age, we rely heavily on getting our information from social media. But typically, I'll either see stuff supporting PETA or against PETA, and that's really it. I don't see anything branching out too much into the differences between welfare and rights or anything like that. But I do tend to lean more against the against PETA side based on what I've seen from social media by itself.
Yeah, so going off that, we didn't really talk on it too much, but could you just really just give us general background of what your life was like before coming to Iowa State? I mean, do you have that experience within animal rights, animal welfare, or just how had you felt about this topic if you'd even heard about it at all?
Yeah, I honestly hadn't heard the term animal welfare really used ever. I was always for animal rights, which now that I'm learning, I've actually been for animal welfare this whole time. But a lot of my friends back home were vegan and vegetarian and very against the use of any animal products. And I just personally getting out into Iowa and getting a new frame of thinking, seeing how other agriculturists are thinking out here as opposed to back home in Illinois, it's very interesting to get different perspectives from all the different sides.
Yeah, for sure. And do you think learning about the difference between animal welfare and animal rights as you learn more about it, do you think that could influence your future choices?
Oh, definitely, yeah. Now knowing the difference, I'm much less an animal rights advocate and more heavily leaning towards animal welfare because I believe now that
like you're okay with the use of
Yes. I like
livestock.
using, I agree with using their products, any of the livestock for clothing or for food purposes, but I do want them to be treated in the best way possible until they are used for those products.
Awesome. Well, I think that's all the time we have with you today, Anna, and we just want to thank you, and your perspective really helps tie everything together and kind of shows what an average consumer that doesn't necessarily have a lot of agricultural knowledge kind of has what their thoughts are on this topic.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me.
What a fascinating discussion today, from Anne's insights into the practical side of animal welfare to Elizabeth's work with educating the youth, the passionate advocacy for animal rights from our representative, and Anna's neutral perspective as a consumer. We've covered a lot of ground today.
This conversation highlights how complex and nuanced these topics are, but also how vital it is to understand them. Misunderstandings can lead to policy changes, consumer confusion, or even conflicts in agricultural practices.
We want to say thank you to our guests for their time and their perspectives, and thank you listeners for tuning in. We encourage you to think critically about what you've heard today and consider how these topics affect your choices in the world around you.
Thank you so much, Quentin and Kaylee, for such an amazing episode. We had some really interesting guests talking about animal rights and animal welfare. I really hope you guys learned something today. I definitely did. Just because you're in agriculture doesn't mean you know everything about it. So it's always fun to learn something new. And that honestly, that's my favorite part about doing this podcast and being a part of this course is how much I learn from the students. So thank you, all of you, for being a part of the episode, tuning in, and don't forget to email us with any comments, questions, or concerns, because that's what we're here for. Continue the conversation there. So with that, we will catch you next time on the CAT Podcast. To email us with any comments, questions, or concerns, please send us an email at contemporary@iastate.edu.